So last year, like I said, it was just this harebrained idea of let's do a storytelling conference under a tree in a backyard in Hollywood because why not? And I just called in some markers from some friends to come talk in my backyard about something amazing. And these two guys did that, and their talks were amazing, and they're online on the website, on the internet, on the web, and you can watch them. And they're each. I gave an offer to all of the speakers from last year to come back and do a 1 year later 5-minute follow-up if there was something new worth following up. And these two took me up on the offer. The first one up is Eli Duke, who I've known for like ever, and he talked about living in Antarctica for 4 summers, and he's going to talk about the year since last.
Hey everyone. So yeah, Shane just stole my thunder there. I worked in Antarctica. I know, right? You're telling me. Yeah. So I think the general theme of my like 5-minute recap is the transition from like one chapter of your life to the next. And you never know when this is going to happen. Sometimes you have a heads up, sometimes you don't. And when I started working in Antarctica, I told myself that I would take a break before I got jaded, because some people do it for 10, 15, sometimes 30 years in a row. And I saw that, and I loved working there, but I didn't want to get, I wanted to continue to appreciate it and be thankful for that. So after doing it for 4 seasons in a row, I decided to take a break, and I knew it was time because it was difficult for me. It was weird realizing that my community in that sense existed in Antarctica. You know, the bulk of my friends the friends that I had worked down there, and the cycles of my life existed in that world. And so sort of shifting gears and living in Portland, which is where I live now, at first it was strangely difficult, and especially right around this past October, which is the normal deployment time when you're packing up and getting ready and saying goodbye to friends and headed south. It was always a very exciting time for me and very fun, and all of a sudden I wasn't going, and a lot of my friends were, and I had to sort of remember that because my community was in Antarctica didn't mean that my community had to continue to be there. And really, you can build a community wherever you want. And so I had to sort of force myself to invest again in a new place and in not necessarily new people, but sort of develop friendships that I had in Portland and sort of enrich them a little bit. So first step was I took aerial acrobatic classes, which was really fun. But it took intention. You know, it wasn't just like, oh, I'm just going to see what happens. Like, I had to intentionally find something and do something and sort of reconnect in a place. And it was really fun. As it turns out, I never would have thought that Shane would live in Los Angeles, ever. The two of us were friends back in Indiana, and we lived in Seattle together for a little bit. I never thought of him as an LA person, and I don't know what that means necessarily, but he seems to have settled in well and connected here. And in the end, you can sort of find a place almost anywhere. And I know that all things being equal, Portland is a pretty special place, and it's not that difficult to connect there. So I kind of had it easy, I think. But I'm sort of on the other side of that now, and I've really realized that realize how important community is. And I think I've known that for a while. I think that's why I connected so well down there, because people go back year after year, and you really become close friends, and you connect very intensely with people. And so I sort of learned a lesson that in the end you can find interesting people, and you can find interesting things as long as you look for it. And I had to start looking, and eventually I found it, and I'm doing great and having a good time. So, thank you.
Since I stole Eli's thunder, this next person has a name, and he talked about something last year.
Hi. So last year, a little earlier than this, my family and I were just kind of finishing up a year of selling a whole bunch of crap and traveling for the whole year. And Shane was like, "Dude, you got to come here and talk about living all over the world for a year." And I was like, "Yeah, that'll be great." And then right before this happened, there was this big earthquake in Japan, and a bunch of hackers that I knew here and a bunch of hackers that I knew there and a bunch of people all sort of decided that maybe there was something we could do to help out. And we were just kind of thinking about what that might be right when this happened last year. So at the very last second, I was like, "Shane, I want to talk about this other thing, which I don't really know what it was." And I could have, I think the talks from last year were archived, so I probably could have looked to see what I exactly, at what point I was last, but I didn't bother to do that. So what we were doing right then was sort of figuring out that the big problem was that nobody knew what the radiation levels were in the country anywhere. In Fukushima specifically, people were really freaking out because they couldn't get any accurate data. The Japanese government had released about 1,000 data points in the country, and most of them were really vague. They would sort of be like, "This is the data point for Los Angeles," but you wouldn't necessarily know how that related to you or where that changed or whatever. So it wasn't very, very informative, and people didn't know what was going on. There was a lot of panicking going on. And so we, and I say we, and I mean me, and just a whole bunch of other people, I played a very small piece of it, decided that we could actually go collect this data and publish it in a way that anybody could get a hold of this data and then get something useful out of it, and at least have accurate information to base whatever decisions they were making on that. And so that's kind of where we were at this time last year. So a year from then, just last week, we published our 3 millionth data point. The Japanese government still has published about 1,000 data points. We have designed several devices. We designed these devices that attach to cars and log a GPS point, and we can drive around all day and collect like 20,000 data points of what the contamination is. We know that it can change from like that side of the fence to this fence can be like night and day different, so it's really important to have very, very specific data. We've sort of changed how people look at radiation measurement around, and so there's been a lot of rethinking on that. All of the data that we've collected, we have released completely with a CC0 designation, which is basically a public domain. So there's no licensing required. Anybody can use it. There's no restrictions on anything. We don't even require attribution. We just want people to take it and do stuff with it. So it's been very great for basically anybody doing research on anything. There's never been a nuclear disaster like this of any kind that this kind of data has been collected and this quickly publicly available. With both 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl, there was lots of people who went in and took like some measurements, and then they like went back to their like labs and hid out for like 10 years and wrote papers, but never actually released their original data, so that people can get data immediately like this. The readings we took yesterday, right now, and contrast them against whatever other data they have is pretty fantastic. We designed a bunch of devices, one of which, so most devices that like, radiation logging stuff is like, hasn't been touched since 1980. So we thought it was time to update that. So we completely open source hardware, a new design that has all sorts of connectivity and does new things. And so that's been released, and now there's a couple people who are sort of putting that into production. And we created a new visualization platform because we realized that everything that was out there to show off data like this sort of sucked and didn't really do it well. And that's also available for anybody to take and do anything that they want with. And so now that we did that for the last year, we're still doing more radiation. We're trying to figure out what the levels are in the rest of the world as well, so that we have some sort of a baseline, so that if anything happens in the future, we can compare it against. We're also adding air quality to that, so we can sort of other environmental factors as well, and then and see whatever else is going on. So everything we're doing is open source. It's all online. There's about 150 people in various aspects helping out with different things. You can go to safecast.org, and if there's some piece that you want to help out with, you can do that. or if there's something that we're doing wrong that you think we can do better, then that's awesome too, or whatever. So yeah, that's been the last year. It's good times.